Get comfortable. Again, we do still have people coming in, but I'll start with my introductions and my information that we always present at the beginning. And excuse me for looking off to the side. I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So, um, we are Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. I think our name pretty much says what we do. We are a nonpartisan organization, but we are not neutral. We are proudly progressive and we lift up those values in our work. CEBV is also part of the National Indivisible network that has groups in every state and is leading resistance to the attempt by the Trump regime to consolidate autocratic power. We do not allow recordings of our meetings and ask that participants honor that and do not use any AI transcription tools. As I said, we are recording this ourselves and we will be distributing that recording. We have a very active chat. We don't let people unmute during the presentation, but please, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. It is easy if you just put the word ask, ASK, in front in all caps. That makes it easy for us to find. Please, if you know CEBV, we love to see where you're from. So please put where you're from in the chat. And we also love people to make connections with each other at our events. So if you see somebody in your area that you may or may not know, please feel free to say hi. I'm from there too. We consider CEBV to be a big community, and we love to encourage you to form communities wherever you are. So please treat each other with respect in the chat. People can disagree on issues, but we should certainly treat each other respectfully in those disagreements. So welcome. Let me introduce our speaker. Oh, and also I want to thank Ian Hamp and Brandy Reese for helping with the chat. If you have questions, again, they will be able to hopefully answer some of them. And we'll also stack the questions if we should have a little bit of time. So let me introduce our speaker. Kimber Lanning is an entrepreneur, a business leader, and community development specialist who works to cultivate strong, self-reliant communities that enable a high quality of life for people across Arizona. She is the founder and CEO of Local First Arizona, an organization focused on creating a thriving Arizona community economy with opportunity for all. And I think what I love most about that is it talks about a thriving economy with opportunity for all of us. And that is something that we should always keep in mind in our business dealings. In response to, oh, this is one fact that I just wanted to include. In response to the COVID pandemic, Lanning led the team at Local First to distribute $52 million in small business relief aid and secured $114 million in new capital for Arizona's small cities, towns, tribes, and nonprofits through federal, state, and foundation grants. And I think that really demonstrates what a public spirit and the organization and Kimber have. And also the feeling that when you see a problem, you can jump in and help to be the solution. So Kimber, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Kathy. I appreciate it. It's good to be with all of you.
Great. So let's start out. What is it about local and Arizona-based businesses that made you realize that Local First was a viable concept? Maybe I think even necessary organization. And how does it empower everyday Arizonans to make constructive decisions that help them in their daily lives?
Sure. Well, as a small business owner myself, in 2003, there was a study that was done in Austin, Texas, that really demonstrated what happens when a city like Austin takes money and gives it to a big chain store to move in across the street from a little record store and a bookstore in Austin, Texas. And they measured and they demonstrated that 3 times more money stays in the local economy when you choose to support a locally owned business. So I think the reason I thought it was viable here initially was because I think that locally owned businesses create a sense of place, a culture, that sort of fabric that makes you proud of your hometown. And so through that lens, I built a network of really cool, creative entrepreneurs and business owners. But when that study came out in 2003, it also caused me to start thinking about the economic reality of what local businesses do. And that really changed my entire arsenal, if you will, to make the case for why we needed this here in Arizona. We're a unique place. So many, people coming in and going out. It's a very transient place. When I landed here in 1971, it was, I grew up in Glendale when I think that it was 17,000 people when I first landed here. And so as we grew, we just grew at this time where chain stores were really popular. It was a popular model. And as a result, a lot of our bright young people were leaving because they said, this place has no culture, it has no soul. So, what I really wanted to do is take all those transplants from the Midwest and connect them here in Arizona the way they're connected to their hometowns. So they may say, "Oh, I'm from Chicago. I love Chicago, but I wanted to connect them here in Arizona." And it turned out that it really struck a nerve with people, that a lot of people had the opinion that we didn't have local options. And when we began showing them how many local options we had, it was like a light bulb went off. I mean, I had people say to me regularly, "Man, in Chicago, I had the same barber for 40 years, and I move out here, and all you guys have is supercuts." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Give me 20 minutes, I'll find you 20 barbers," right? And they were like, "Really? Where?" And so another thing is we have to overcome our geography too. We have this grid laid out here in the Phoenix area, and the big chains own all the corner lots, which really builds that perception that we don't have local options. So it really struck a nerve, and it took us a while to get going, but now that we're going, we're really going. And many people don't realize we're the largest coalition in the country.
Wow, I did not realize that. So that is unbelievably impressive. Um, One of the things that really interests me about Local First is a belief structure around both social value and bottom line business. In other words, I mean, I am personally a firm believer that you can provide social value for your company, for your employees, and at the same time benefit your bottom line. So I'm thinking of sort of the conservative knee-jerk um opposition to ESG, or environment social governance structure, which many, in fact most businesses really adhere to. So can you talk about how those two go together and in fact reinforce each other?
Well, sure. Related to your first question, I think that more and more people are waking up to the fact that the economy is truly ours to own. And that means the way we spend our money is shaping the world around us. There's only two kinds of power. There's money and there's people. And we're getting our butts kicked on the money right now, but not on the people. And so the more people we can get into understanding that the way we spend our money is definitely shaping the community around us. It's shaping how our taxes are collected and invested. It's shaping literally everything from the way the streets look. Because if all the local businesses close, we're going to have a whole lot of blight. Like if everybody sits on the couch and orders from Amazon and all the businesses close, our real estate market is going to crash, right? So they need to start, and I do think they're waking up to that, understanding the way they spend their money directly impacts the world around us. So I think that in addition to that, people that care about the earth and care about the environment are being very intentional about supporting companies that have their priorities around their environmental impact. So businesses we run the Green Business Certification Program here in Arizona. We have businesses that we take through the Green Business Boot Camp. And all of them, virtually all of them, will tell you that it was good for business. It was a good decision for them because once they told the public, hey, we've done everything we can to lower our carbon footprint, people come in and they spend money, they bring their friends, and they know it as a green company. And we tell our businesses all the time, be a green leader. And watch, people will spend money with you before your competition. So I think, sure, it's going to cost a little bit of money, but it also pays off in the long run. And I will tell you one last thing: people want to work for a company that cares about the environment, and they're likely to stay longer with your company if you've made it a priority.
Mhm. Um, what about the sort of social values of diversity? Now, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think, are quintessential American values, and I believe that they do provide, in fact, bottom line value to a company. Is that something you could speak to, the sort of social, not just green values, but social support in that?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. It is so important to take care of your teams, to offer healthcare benefits, to make sure that they have the support they need if they're going through personal things. Hiring practices that focus on inclusion at every turn pays off in terms of building a healthy, diverse team, in terms of retention. As I mentioned before, more people want to work in diverse environments. It's just as simple as that. So the more businesses can invest in that inclusive environment, the better off they'll be. In the long run, every single study I have seen shows that it pays off. I've never seen a study that says don't make these investments, they're not worthwhile. Not one.
Mhm. This wasn't what this is sort of an extension of that thought, but I'm also curious about sort of the ingredients of long-term success versus sort of short-term pop. And I mean, I certainly feel that investing in your people, investing in your workforce, as well as, sort of whether it's environmental justice or other sort of benefits for the community and your workforce, that those build long-term success versus sort of short-term profitability. Is that
Right.
something you take into consideration as well?
Oh, sure. I mean, we help build high quality businesses that are here for the long term. They're also civically engaged. You know, we have a fast responders list of people who've raised their hand and say, yes, we want to be engaged. If there's a bill out there that is not good for Arizona, call us. We will write letters. And we've been involved in a good number of campaigns where we've been able to get a ton of small business owners engaged. Most recently, we just reached out to Juan Ciscomani's office to demand that he continue to support the tax credits. In the end, he abandoned us, but for a while we had him there. So, but doesn't change the fact that those same businesses that are invested in their staff, that are invested in inclusivity, that are invested in a better, healthier future for Arizona, those are those legacy businesses that we know and love. And Local First Arizona, we're going to do everything we can to get customers to support those businesses.
That's great. Um, so I want to take a really big step back and look at some of the large forces in the country today that are going to really impact Arizona's economy. Maybe you could start with tariffs, but what else? What is going on that is sort of coming down the pike at us?
Yeah. So I would hit on, A lot has been said about tariffs, but the high note that you want to walk away with when thinking about tariffs is that small businesses are taking on extra debt right now, making a bet that Q3 and Q4 are going to be really strong. And they're also, taking on extra storage. They're investing in things before prices go up. These are huge risks, and we're not going to know for 6 months if those risks pay off or not. So, just if people are in your face saying, "Look, nothing's happening, prices haven't gone up," it's like there's an earthquake in the middle of the ocean. It takes a minute for the tsunami to hit the beach. So, it's going to take a minute on the tariffs for us to fully understand what those impacts are going to be. But at Local First Arizona, I want to highlight very big things that folks should be thinking about. And we primarily work in 3 different systems. So there's lots of systems at play in everyone's life every day, and we're all part of systems, whether we like that or not, right? I breathe the same air that other people breathe, and we're part of that same ecosystem. So the 3 that I want to talk about are the energy system, the food system, and the financial system. And those 3, all of our programs and all of our teams are focused on those 3 systems. So what I want you thinking about in the energy system is, if you haven't looked, there's some, I think it's S2 Strategies has created a bullet pointed list of all the direct impacts that the big, beautiful bill are going to have on eliminating all the climate related incentives, anything that you can think of related to a clean economy transition. Those have all been eliminated, and they've been replaced with a $1 billion loan fund. And this is just so important for us all to understand. When you have incentives that are aimed at low income families, low income communities, and others to be able to participate in a clean economy transition, whether that be fighting to get electric vehicle stations in areas that aren't able to afford Teslas yet, but in the future will need those charging stations, or if we're talking about jobs related to solar panels, anything related to the clean economy. When you take that all away, all of those incentives, and you replace it with a loan fund, that means the only people that will be participating are the people who can afford to qualify for those loans. So again, we were poised in America to have the very first in our history economic transition that was truly inclusive. And that is now gone. And we're going to do what we've done in the past, where you're going to have 10 major big companies take all of the profits and everybody else is going to be turned into a worker bee. So it's really important to understand the energy system. The second thing I want to point out about the energy system is that AI is such a huge demand on energy resources that here in Arizona, throughout the Southwest, our big utility companies have no idea how they're going to provide that energy. And they're not even trying to pretend that they do. There are 16 data centers already in the queue in SRP's territory. They do not have the energy to support those. And so they have issued a statement saying that it's quite possible that within the next few years, you're going to see new energy. So for example, small businesses, homes, and other things that are looking for energy hookups, up to a 4-year waiting list. And that's because there's not enough energy to go around. So if they prioritize data centers for serving AI customers, the rest of us are going to end up in line waiting. We're going to see more rolling blackouts. And what's critical to understand is that those data centers are 24/7, so they cannot be solar powered. They are using fossil fuels to fund them or to fuel them. And so they're falling back on all of their clean energy goals. So energy, to answer your question, that's a big one. Food systems. The food system is going to rear up and slap America right across the face very soon for a number of different reasons. We're putting tariffs on the import of fresh produce. We just had the tomato gate happened in the last few days here, where they've increased by 17%. And people don't understand the difference. What it's going to do is not only increase the price and cost, but it's also going to diminish our choices. Here in Arizona, we have a lot of greenhouse tomato growers. Those are those rich, juicy, bright red tomatoes that are picked fresh. What's going to replace those are tomatoes that are field grown from Florida. They pull them when they're green, they gas them, and they ship them across the country, and they're kind of pithy and tasteless. So it's really, really important to know that not only are tomatoes going to increase in cost, but what happened was the Florida growers just used regulatory practices to limit our choices in the country. So the food system, we do not have enough people in America to pick the vegetables that are going to be grown. So if we want to exit everybody, and of course they're backpedaling now, but the reality is, people tell me there's not going to be a food shortage, and I just say, okay, so your grandkids are going to be picking those veggies then? Let's have a real conversation about that. So we are limiting small and mid-sized farms. That's what creates robust local food economies. And the big beautiful bill pours over $60 billion into our biggest commodity crop producers. That's going to be soy, corn, and wheat. That goes into the production of all of the processed foods that are making Americans sick. Specialty crop producers is another way of just talking about vegetable growers. They tend to be smaller farms, they tend to be more regional, and they are getting cut. Yeah, just yesterday they announced the regional food business centers are being eliminated. They were created to serve small and mid-sized farms. So really important, once again, that we understand the sleight of hand that is happening when you combine these policies all at the same time. And then the final one is the financial system. We are going to see more and more big banks in cahoots with the government. They are going to perform very well. They're going to get a lot of money, and they're going to have less requirements for Community Reinvestment Act dollars, which is what traditionally the government has said, okay, you big banks, you have to invest through the Community Reinvestment Act back into our communities. And that's on the chopping block. Trump tried to eliminate his first term, and now there's really nothing going to stop him this time. So those three systems, watch out. Tariffs is just the headline, but those other three systems are coming out, and through the same theme throughout, and it's class warfare. The same theme throughout all of those things I just highlighted, which is that you're defunding access to public education while you're funding billionaires, and it is not providing any opportunities for growth for low income or middle Americans at all.
Great. Um, yeah. Okay, it's gonna take me a minute.
It's a
Uh,
lot, but that's what we're up against.
uh-huh. Yeah, one small part of that always, you know, infuriates me is why historically, I mean, Arizona has not been a solar capital at all. And, I was really optimistic that with investments in clean energy, that we could turn that around. But it is not just external forces that are doing that. I mean, I feel our very own corporation commission is playing a role there. Can you talk for a minute about the corporation commission? I mean, that these are people that we elect directly. So how are they standing in the way, or are they standing in the way of clean energy?
Well, I think that, I always hear in my mind, remember that famous line where Obama said, "Don't boo,
Yeah.
vote," right?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
so, if we want more clean energy, if we want a more just clean energy transition, we need to vote. And
Yeah.
so, I think that the people we have there now have demonstrated they are definitely on the side of the big companies and not supporting affordability just across the board.
Mhm.
The latest thing where they've said that they don't have to be held liable for wildfires. That one
Yeah.
was really scary. That's going to pass on to the backs of taxpayers. So
Mhm.
a lot of scary stuff happening there. But
Yeah.
again, don't boo, vote.
Mhm. Yeah, they call that the APS can burn your house down bill that did pass and was signed. Um, so what are some of the, I mean, what are the impacts of some of the other I mean, you referred to this briefly in terms of cutting funds for public education, but some of the other big policy shifts that are coming down the pike, um, and that may not be as obvious about how they are going to impact us. Cutting public education, that's been a large part of my work for 8 years. So that matters a great deal to me. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity that closes off for people. So are there any other directions that you want to take um that in terms of what other things are coming at us that may not be as obvious?
Oh, Kathy, you want me to even go deeper and darker? I give you some really, really big ones. Education is a bit out of my lane. And as I mentioned, we're going to have serious energy issues if we don't course correct there. I mean, there's a lot coming at us, and I think it's really aimed at, all the crypto stuff is that's moving in high speed is not going to advantage the everyday Joe. We're not protecting good quality jobs. We're not providing kids with the education they deserve, that they should have by right. There's just, I think I've highlighted enough to keep people awake tonight. So let's just move
Just
forward.
move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so now I want to bring it a little bit back to Arizona. I mean, I don't know if there's feel free to throw anything about the national sort of political climate or changes that are relevant. But we're a group that involves ourselves very deeply in the state legislature and in local elections and city councils, school boards, et cetera. Uh, so what policy changes are sort of coming out of our local politics, our local political entities, such as the legislature, that you have impacted also for positive or to stop some policies? How is the legislature doing with regard to business in Arizona?
Um, Similarly to what's happening at the national level, I think that there's a lot of movement at the state legislature toward what they call a business friendly environment. But that is primarily framed around large businesses and larger employers. Certainly, our economic development strategy here in Arizona is focused on how do we attract companies into Arizona and then quickly calculate how many jobs they're going to create without ever calculating how many jobs those same companies might eliminate, right? And convincing us that that's the best way to go. We believe that business retention and business expansion and incubators and startups are a better way to invest in an economic development strategy. And really investing in our own existing assets here in Arizona is a really good strategy to grow. Used to be called economic gardening. I love that term because I think it's very relevant to what we believe in. So those policies are frustrating. We are still, in terms of procurement policy, we are still one of only 4 remaining states that just mandates low bid wins. So, for example, let's say, Kathy, you have a company that's headquartered on the other side of the world. You have 20 employees here in Arizona that manage things here on the ground. You don't offer healthcare benefits for 80% of your employees. And Arizona is just a number to you. Like we'll bid on that. Versus me, I'm an Arizona company. I have 2,000 employees right here in Arizona. I give them all healthcare benefits. I'm rooted in the local economy here. And if you underbid me by say $1,200 on a $5 million contract, we're going to give that contract to you. And so it's so important that we have a state legislature that thinks that that's a way to save money, that the $1,200 that they're saving by hiring you is costing the rest of us a fortune because we're missing an opportunity to employ all those people with quality jobs and healthcare benefits, et cetera, et cetera. It's really important for people to understand that is not a savings. I like to say cheap is costing us a fortune. And
Mhm.
so those kinds of policies are just wildly important. Local First Arizona put a stop to the massive chain store subsidies that were happening in the state for a long time. Cabela's out on the west side got a $68 million subsidy. Walmart's were averaging about $35 million per store in subsidies. And a lot of those, and it's so important to think about this, a lot of what they get is a sales tax abatement. That means you go in and you buy something and you pay your sales tax, and that's a social contract. You think that money is going to support, parks and libraries and swimming pools. And no, they get to keep it a 10-year sales tax abatement for every one of those Walmart stores that they negotiated those deals for, which, Walmart was our largest employer in the state of Arizona for 20 straight years. 83% of their employees have no health care benefits, and they were getting an average of $35 million in government subsidy per store. So work with me here to understand those are not cheaper prices. That is just deferred billing. We are paying for it in a different way. And Local First Arizona was instrumental in putting a stop to that. So those would just be a handful of examples that come to me off the top of my head.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I'm really curious. There are certainly a lot of subsidies and a lot of um uh whether it's a tax abatement or, $1 billion to the Diamondbacks for stadium improvements. Um, I really, and I mean, I believe that Senator Cubie in the chat also talked about the chambers of commerce playing a role in, not a constructive role, I might add, in um, really not benefiting local businesses. So I mean, what more can we do, and what more should we do to persuade the legislature of some of the points that you're making?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think it's a lot about meeting with our state legislators. It's so important that, in the 70s, so many of our state legislators came from a business background, and now almost none of them did.
Mm,
So, when I'm standing on the Senate floor debating these types of things, it's not unusual to have somebody say, "Oh, this is so complicated," right? They are not accustomed to having these kinds of conversations and understanding. They're after the soundbite. One said to me, "I just want the cheapest price for my constituents." And I said, "Well, ma'am, you're not getting that. You're costing your constituents a fortune." And
mhm,
it's just constant reminder, constant conversation, and helping them understand these issues. And I don't mean to, I certainly don't mean to diminish anyone's intelligence. I'm just saying it's not typically their language.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
So
how did that legislator respond when you said that that they were costing her constituents?
In that particular case, she was just frustrated and done with the conversation because she wasn't understanding. Yeah.
Mm,
That's
lovely.
okay. I went back to her, I went back to her. Ultimately, we were not able to get it passed because at that point, and this was years ago, but the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry jumped up and opposed us. And then one year, the Arizona Contractors Association opposed us. But if you looked at their board of directors, they were 80% California owned companies. So
Mm,
yeah, so we've got our fair share of challenges.
mhm. Yes, I definitely see that. Well, I do hope, as the next legislative session comes up, that you will keep in touch and give us some opportunities to, send information out to our followers and have them help with uh sort of citizen lobbying, which is what we are so good at.
Yeah.
So,
One other thing I'll add to that, Kathy, is just we Local First Arizona has really jumped in broadly on in support of immigration reform. And what we're seeing right now is terrifying in never something I thought I would never see in my lifetime. But immigration reform is desperately needed, and we need to provide pathways for people to come to this country and build their dreams. We all benefit from diverse immigrant populations, and moreover, America's we're not producing the next generation. We will not have the workforce to do what the future needs. And it's so important that we keep our doors open to immigrants from all around the world. So, and then hate bills, bills that come out this for no good reason that are just hateful bills. We jump in on those, and it's so important for every one of us to use our voice. I would even go so far as to say to sit quietly with a bill that's like attacking our LGBTQ community is, we've all seen the shirts, but we can't remain silent in those
Mhm.
kind of battles.
Awesome. That is great. I love to hear that, and we endorse that 1,000%. Um, can you talk for a minute about business startups and new businesses, and what is the climate like in Arizona today for starting a new business?
So I think, the way I would respond to that is that small business in general and small business startups are definitely not a monolith. So if you look by sector,
Yeah.
some sectors are doing exceptionally well and others not so much. Our restaurant industry is getting pummeled right now for a few different reasons. They operate on very slim margins. We're seeing the price of food continue to go up. And for a number of different reasons. Our solar sector is just on fumes and is being decimated by tariffs. We're seeing certain manufacturing that is just being decimated. One of the women in the chat right here already sadly lost her job because of tariffs. And so manufacturing is depends on what you're manufacturing. We had a conversation with a furniture company, and they try to source everything locally, but even with an American made sofa, the fabric still came from Vietnam and the springs inside still came from China. And I understand the value of localizing supply chains. In fact, I've dedicated my life to it, but you can't localize a supply chain in the flip of a switch. I mean, just on the tomato industry alone, they estimate it would take more than $1 billion investment in 40 years to be able to get to a place where we could be self-sufficient with tomato demand right here in Arizona. So you can't just cut that off in an instant and then expect that we're going to fix that. So I think it's just really important for people to understand the complexity of the economy and how thoughtfully we are going to need to steer things. It's going to take incentives. It's going to take encouragement and education. And, I'm all about supply chain localization. I think it's great, but the way it's happening right now is not even remotely realistic. And certain industries, don't get me wrong, they're never going to localize, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be very real about our approach.
Right. And I think that I don't see a lot of that going on, frankly. It is very, very difficult to sort of absorb all the different things that are being done that from immigration to the green economy to our financial system, crypto, all of that, I mean, is just so destructive, so
Yeah.
destructive.
One other thing I want to say that may not be very popular, I don't know, but housing, I actually support the state legislature trying to leverage land use zoning regulations that they control to encourage infill.
Mhm.
And I just think that a handful of very wealthy neighbors that are very loud NIMBYs are preventing things like accessory dwelling units and real opportunities for churches, for example, to build more affordable housing. And May not be the most popular thing, but I'll tell you, if we don't start focusing more on, I mean, housing is we've been talking about it as a crisis for years, and we're still no better off. And so our wealthy neighbors need to get comfortable with being a little more cozy here in the fifth largest city in the country, and also density is not a dirty word.
Mhm. No, I think that we understand that. I consider housing and water to be the most complex issues in, of any issues in Arizona. And we talk in some of one of our trainings about zoning and the fact that if affordable housing and homelessness are issues that matter to you, then you should be paying attention to your city and the zoning commission.
Mhm.
Um, and zoning is also sort of one of those, you can use it for good and for ill. So it is definitely a challenging subject, but I definitely don't disagree with you at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about the rural economy in Arizona. I have traveled around the state a lot and I love, love doing that. One of the greatest places I've been to in since I can remember is the art car world in Douglas, Arizona, which is just an amazing place. Highly recommend. But that is, I mean, not necessarily about the, rural business climate. Can you talk about, what is going on in our rural spaces, our rural businesses? What is sort of the balance of business and industry as you go all over the state?
Yeah, well, I like to say if you've been to one rural Arizona town, you've been to one rural Arizona town. They are so different. They are not a monolith. And I think it's really important also to note that rural and tribal are very different as well. I think people tend to lump those together and they just couldn't be more different. These are sovereign nations. They may be remote, but that's about all they have in common. So rural Arizona, if you think about our top 10 industries here in Arizona, seven of them are rural based, and yet the vast majority of resources flow into our urban areas. So when you unpack things like, we had a big announcement here about all the new jobs that were created in Arizona, the beating of the drum of how great our economy is doing. But if you unpack that, 85% of those jobs were created in Maricopa County. 5% of those jobs were created in Pima County. And that leaves 10% of those jobs around 13 rural communities or counties, excuse me. So it's so lopsided. It's shocking how much money is flowing into the urban areas. Our rural nonprofits don't get enough funding. They, their community colleges don't get their fair share of funding. So it just kind of goes on and on and on. We are the State Rural Development Council. It's a federal designation that we acquired in 2013, and we do a lot of rural community and economic development work. So I think if there's anything for folks to understand, if you go to our website, go down the wormhole and look at our rural community profiles, look at Explore AZ, go and have a look around, because doing those little in-state little staycations, if you will, traveling to rural areas makes a huge difference. Go and spend some money locally and you will see just the most high quality things. If you haven't been to Cottonwood, I would stand up the Tavern Hotel against any big hotel that I've ever stayed in terms of the quality of experience. So, get out there and explore. We have fascinating museums and outdoor recreation. There's so much to get out there and do. But to your point, whether you're talking about mining or forestry or agriculture, tourism, all of those dollars are coming through in our rural towns, and they benefit the whole state, and then they in turn don't get their fair share back.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, let me So, you have said that 7 out of 10 of Arizona's top industries are rural based, and I really find that fascinating. We tend to sort of glaze over, what is going on in the, from an industry standpoint out there in the rural spaces. Can you talk a little bit more about how those industries benefit the local economies,
Oh,
and
sure.
also of small businesses, and what they do for the local economies?
Well, small businesses, most people are shocked to hear this, but about 70% of the people in Arizona work for a small business, and 90+% of the businesses in Arizona are considered small. So we are a small business state, and most people don't think about how many small businesses are out there, but there's just thousands and thousands. In our rural areas, the small businesses are just critically important, and the way the economy is connected. So, what we like to call is the multiplier effect. So, our local businesses are going to be much more likely to hire a local graphic design firm or a local website developer or a local payroll service provider. So, when you're in a rural town, that becomes essential. So think about how are you going to be an accountant and stay in a rural town if there's not local businesses there to hire you? You're not going to have somebody coming out of Phoenix to hire your firm in a small town. How are you going to get found? So you're going to have to rely on that local economy to make it work. So our mantra in our rural towns is just to make sure that you're doing everything you can to look locally for talent first, and help that startup. If you've got a recent college grad that's come back to town to start a clinic or to start a graphic design firm, give them a shot. We have Rotary clubs that actually offer incentives for graduates to come back to the rural town after college, and good incentives too. Like, we'll pay your rent for a year if you start a business in our town. And then they do a lot of fundraising around it and get a lot of people involved. So rural towns, it's so important. The other thing, we have a thing coming in America called the silver tsunami, which is a lot of our workforce is aging out. And what that means in private sector self-employment space is that we have rural towns that don't have any electrician or plumber or welder or heavy equipment operator under the age of 65 years old.
Oh,
Think
mm,
about that.
wow.
So we need to create journeyman programs. We need to create all kinds of programs that are encouraging the workforce to stay in the rural towns so they can see, wow, if I just learn this skill and shadow this electrician who's owned this company for 25 years, I might be the owner of that company one day. Right. And otherwise, you lose yet another electrician in that town. And we have this happening all over Southern Arizona right now. If your large refrigerator goes out at your restaurant in Bisbee, you are waiting for somebody to come from Sierra Vista, period. Because there's nobody locally that's going to be able to repair that for you. And so it could be days. You know what it's like to have a restaurant and be closed for days? Doesn't work so well.
Mhm.
So these are all things that our economic development team should be focused on, in my mind, rather than attracting companies to come in. That's great to create all those high wage jobs, but what is happening on the ground right now in Arizona has got to be priority.
Mhm. That's great. And that sort of brings me back to in a bit where we started, but also where I always like to go during these conversations, which is what can we do? What can the people on this call do? Whether within their local communities or in a political sense, we're working on legislation or working on, lobbying our public officials. We just had a note in the chat that David Schweikert said he voted for that bill because it would help small businesses. I find that very difficult to believe, but what can we do?
Yeah, so to comment on that, I think there's really only two choices. He either didn't read the bill and somebody told him that, or he's deliberately counting on the fact that you're not going to read the bill. And there's really those are the only two reasons that he would say such a thing, in my mind. Having spent some time reading the bill, there's not a whole lot of incentive or support for small business. Now, there is this belief that if you just shut down and tax imports, that suddenly overnight small businesses are going to sprout up. But unfortunately, that is just not how it works. It's going to take years and decades. And in the meantime, all of these prices are going to continue to go up.
Mhm.
And so what can people do? Gosh, the number one thing you can do is really take a good hard look at how you're spending your money and shift it to locally owned businesses wherever you can. So doesn't mean it has to be everything. We used to say if even 10%. My colleagues in Grand Rapids, Michigan did a study that in a town the size of Tucson, if everyone there committed to just shifting 10% of their spending, it would create 132 million new dollars recirculating in that economy and 1,600 brand new jobs. So I would just encourage you all to remember that the economy is ours to own. It is not something far away from us that someone else is going to fix for us. We are the economy, period. So if we want to end sweatshops on the other side of the world, fine. Stop buying the products that they produce. They'll be gone. People always say, oh, but they need those good jobs. Hold the owner's feet to the fire until they start producing better jobs, and don't buy their products until they do that. So don't tell me we need to protect slave labor on the other side of the world when you just don't want to give up your shoes. So try really hard to spend your money with companies that are doing good work. The closer the home, the better. Educate yourself. Get involved. I like to call leadership is really just accountability. I was just talking to Kathy right before this. I heard ads on the radio claiming that immigrants were bringing disease and drugs into the country. And I called the radio station. I leveraged my power. We all have some kind of power. My power was I'm going to tell the largest coalition in the country of small business owners to never buy an ad with you again until you pull that ad. It is lies and misinformation. And they did. They pulled it. Now, that's being able to leverage the power of a large small business coalition, but every single one of us can make that call. And they do care. It's one thing to say this or that about a policy, but you can't just blanket say immigrants are bringing drugs and disease into our country. No, not on my watch. And that's the accountability that each and every one of us has. We need to use it.
Mhm. Wow. Um, so do you have any last words that you could leave us with? Um, or alternatively, Brandy and Ian, are there any questions in the chat that we have not, or comments that would stimulate a little bit of discussion?
I do have one more thing that we haven't talked
Okay.
about, and that is in the financial sector, the way things are so integrated, we have to really continue to educate and inform ourselves. So I want you to just think about the fact that Arizona State, we talked about the state legislature, and we talked about the financial system. The state of Arizona has its money invested in various things in various ways. So we've taken all of our deposits and we've given them to Bank of America, and then Bank of America invests them all over the world in things that we may or may not find values aligned. But this one is a great example. All of the pension programs for the state of Arizona are invested heavily in private prisons,
Oh,
right? So here we are, our judges, our police force, our teachers, their pensions are invested in profiting off of mass incarceration. And that is hidden out of our view. We need to continue to elevate those things, talk about those things, and demand something better for those investments. So that would just be something that comes to mind.
that is very disturbing and and absolutely something that I think we could galvanize some people around. That is work that the state treasurer does. Is that correct? Making those decisions about where to invest?
State treasurer is going to make a big part of that decision, but the legislature has to sign off on all of it, So, and I'm grateful to Mike in the chat. He reminded me, absolutely, move your money to a local bank or credit union. That's one of the most important things you can do. Those big banks continue to undermine low-income communities and communities of color. And just Google Wells Fargo redlining and all of the not ancient history, just within the last 5 years, racial discrimination in lending lawsuits, and they've paid them out over and over and over again. So move your money out of those banks if you really want to help our communities.
Mhm. Who do we need to write or call about investing in private prisons? I second that. I can do some research on that. Um, but I mean, if you have more information, I would be
Yeah,
great.
so what I would recommend is that you start following a nonprofit organization called Abolish Private Prisons.
And I
Um,
see John Dacey on the call
I see
also.
John Dacey on the call, and they are getting ready to start a national campaign to look into those types of investments. So support his organization as well, and they'll be able to keep you informed. But certainly, we will help if there's like a letter writing campaign or a way that small businesses can get involved in changing that practice right away.
Great. And thanks to Brandy for dropping that link in the chat. I will be very happy to see what we can stir up on that subject.
And if you do go to localfirstaz.com, there is a button, a tab on the far right for Take Action. And under Take Action, there's about 10 things you can do to support the economy and to support the work that we do.
Awesome. That is great. And we will send out that, not only that link, but those 10 things in our follow-up email. I think that will be a great action for everyone.
Great.
Um, well, Kimber, I can't thank you enough for giving us an hour. It's never enough. Um, and I would like to have you on regularly to help galvanize people, because I know there was some very dark information on the call, but I think it's also so incredibly important for us to feel our economic power and also our ability to make a difference in this realm. As you said, there are people and is money.
Yeah.
So we we have a lot of that power in our hands.
We
And
do. We can do this. We can do
mhm,
this.
yeah, so it's not just a matter of policy, but what we do in our everyday lives.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Kimber, again, thank you so, so much.
Thank you
And
for having me here. It's good to be with you all, and follow up with me if I can offer any additional information.
we definitely will.
All right.
Uh,
Take care.
Thanks again and good night, everyone.